Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I'm your everyone no shorty. And just to warn you up front, this one is going to have some spoilers in it. So if you are waiting to read DC versus Vampires, I'm going to read it now before you watch the rest of this video. I'm not going to put in too many major things, but suffice to say, some people are going to be vampires. And if you'd rather have that revealed to you by reading the comic book instead of me just telling you on a YouTube video, go take care of that. Right, that's all out of the way. Let's talk about the artwork first. It's good drawing, but man, those colours put me off straight away. Take a look at that cover. Pay attention to what's actually going on that cover. We'll come back to that later. But when you look at those really washed out shades and the really light intermingling between them, feels like it's not going to be what I want it to be. And I've got to be honest, I spent a good few pages being like, okay, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. And then boom, really good showing of what you can do with colour palettes when you do it well. And if anything, the fact that it started out so washed out and so genuinely uneventful and unimpressive meant when they actually got to grips with what they were doing, it worked really, really effectively. The actual line work is above average, but it didn't do anything to really blow my mind. Some of the character things are fantastic. There's nice little bits of like just a raised eyebrow here and there, which I really quite like. The person who did the Green Lantern did a really, really good job on it, but the Wonder Twin was a little bit lacking. Definitely above average, but not good enough for me to tell you the artwork is a selling point for this book. That being said, it does do something really well because it's a certain type of horror they're doing here. My first thought when I picked it up was, oh, DC versus vampires, this is going to be Marvel Zombies, kind of. But straight away, disavowed that completely. For a start, Marvel Zombies is 3 massive volumes all collected together, and that kind of zombie storytelling does nothing for me. In fact, that kind of over-the-top, really long, drawn-out horror storytelling does nothing for me. Well, occasionally. Think stuff like American Horror Story. Really nice idea, but the thing about horror cinema is in small doses you can really ramp up the terror and you can keep people on edge pretty much an entire movie if you do it right. Doing that for an hour a week over 10 weeks, you're gonna lose something. I don't care how good a storyteller you are. And the same thing with comic book storytelling. If you're trying to do something that long and horror is a part of it, I don't think there's a single person out there good enough to keep me scared that long. Simply because the way the human mind works, I'm just going to get numbed to it. I'm going to get immune to it. I'm going to get used to it. And that's not going to be scary anymore. So zombies kind of fit into that thing of like, well, it is an unrelenting horror. It is always going to be there. They're always going to come and get you. Think of like the Walking Dead TV series, how long the comic book's been going. But even then, you get like repetitive kind of storylines of them going to a new place. Oh, it looks like whoever's in here's got it sorted. Oh, no, it turns out they're evil as well. Now zombies are going to come in. When you've only got 12 issues, back to the DC versus Vampires here, I kind of like the way they're doing that. I don't think it needs to be any longer than that. I think you've got kind of a decent setup. Let's see how it plays out. Let's see what you're going to do with it. And this horror is very different to the unrelenting kind of zombie thing. It is far more playing on paranoia. It's who can we trust? Bear in mind, in most mythology, vampires mostly look like people. And in the DC universe, vampires being a known quantity, some of them do look a bit different for the most part, yeah. When you turn into a vampire, you are a person who is a vampire. You're not a completely different species. You don't look as such, and you're really happy to blend in. There are other ways to do that. In a world with superpowers, you imagine what's going to go with that. Zombies don't necessarily have full control of their faculties. Vampires, if anything, get better, makes them even more scary. And it works really quite nicely in this one. You do have the sense of this leading, like, okay, if there's somebody who's going to be a vampire, who would you not want it to be? And you've got an entire like pantheon of DC characters to do it with. And the first one that comes out is Green Lantern, which is really quite cool because they can literally affect light. So they're not worried about going out in the daylight. That makes them even more terrifying. There's a point when one of the Wonder Twins kind of figures out what's going on. Green Lantern just creates with his lantern ring a giant blender and runs the kid through it. Just then drinks what's left of him and complains that it's slightly watery. It is brutal, and I love it. The only weird thing I find about it is one thing that makes vampires and, let's just think, the zombie fiction so effective is we live in a world where we know they're not real. We basically, no matter who you are, no matter how many times you've read Zombie Survival Guide and have a go bag and a plan to survive in the upcoming apocalypse, if you found out, if somebody told you that zombies were a thing, chances are you'd be like, yeah, right, that's a made up story. In the DC universe, people know there are vampires. They exist. There's probably people now to fight them, and I think it's going to make it a little bit harder to like maintain like that deniability of like, oh well, yeah, vampires can take over because nobody expects vampires. Vampires are real in this world, and I'm not sure how that's going to play into the whole paranoia kind of thing, but I want to see where it goes. It's Tinian, who's a great writer, and Rosenberg, who is an up and comer I'm really quite keen on. I'm looking forward to seeing what else they can do. If I had more time, I'd talk about like how two writers can take on the same project and see how it feels that way. But I'm already at my 5 minutes, so I'm going to leave it. I might come back tomorrow. If I don't start a Task Force Z, I might rock that early in the morning. Until then, look after each other, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.